Hello everyone and welcome back to English with Kayleigh. In today's video we're going to analyse another one of Ted Hughes' poems, which is entitled Football at Slack. And if you're sitting the CAIE syllabus next year, this is part of the Ted Hughes collection. So first of all I'll read through the poem and then we'll discuss the summary and the main themes, and then we'll break down our analysis. So let's get started. Football at Slack. Between plunging valleys on a bare back of hill, men in bunting colours bounced, and their blown ball bounced. The blown ball jumped, and the merry-coloured men sprouted like water to head it. The ball blew away downwind. The rubbery men bounced after it. The ball jumped up and out and hung in the wind over a gulf of treetops. Then they all shouted together, and the blown ball blew back. Winds from fiery holes in heaven piled the hills, darkening around them to awe them. The glare light mixed its mad oils and threw glooms. Then the rain lowered a steel press. Hair plastered, they all just trod water to puddle glitter, and their shouts bobbed up, coming fine and thin, washed and happy. While the humped world sank foundering, and the valleys blued unthinkable under the depth of Atlantic depression. But the wingers leapt, they bicycled in air, and the goalie flew horizontal. And once again a golden holocaust lifted the cloud's edge to watch them. Okay, so let's do a brief overall summary of what happens in the poem. So first of all, we see a group of men playing football in the English valleys. Something to note is Slack is a village near where Ted Hughes actually grew up in Yorkshire. So the wind blows the ball to and from them, and they are seen chasing the ball across the field. Then we see the storm clouds appear and the wind intensifies. The men are impressed by the immensity of the storm, and they seem to be cleansed by the rain and feeling very happy, and we see them continue to play. Finally, we see the sun emerging, and it almost looks on at the players enjoying the game of football. So what are the themes in Football at Slack? Well, there are two main ones we'll be exploring. The first of which is the power of human nature, and the second is the power of nature and just how majestic it is. So let's get into our deep layered analysis. So stanza number 1, so we have context given in the title. As I said, Slack is a village in England, so we get to see a more personal poem from Hughes, potentially a more autobiographical piece than some of his other works. So straight away it opens within the action, okay, and we see this subtle personification of the hill with the bare back of the hill, and it shows really how both nature and the players are alive. We have men in bunting colours, an excellent word. I put a visual there just to show you what is bunting. And if we think about the connotations of this word, of course we consider colourful, but we also go to think, okay, when do we use bunting? Well, it is for celebrations and times of excitement. So we have bounced and their blown ball bounced. So this is a diacope where we have the repetition of two words with several words in between. And this goes to highlight the relationship between the players and the ball. Okay, because we have the men who were bouncing and also the blown ball. And it suggests that both the players and the ball are almost bouncing around the field. So we get a very lively and uplifting tone. In stanza 1, we of course see enjambment, and this really goes to emphasize the pace of the game and what we are witnessing, and it almost acts as an aid for the visual story that's playing out in our minds. So we do see throughout the first few stanzas, there's a lot of alliteration of this plosive B sound. And this goes to add musicality to the poem. But I think that the beautiful thing is that it creates this almost bouncing rhythm as we see the ball travel across the field and throughout the poem. So stanza 2, we go back to the blown ball, and this is actually called anadiplosis, and this is the repetition of a word or phrase on the previous line, at the end of the previous line, and then towards the beginning of the subsequent line. And of course, this repetition mimics the ball almost bouncing across the poem and the field. And again, we do see personification again, as the ball cannot actually jump, but it's being almost, it's being kicked around by the players. And the merry coloured men. So once again, we have the connotations that are repeated from the previous stanza. Uplifting, merry, coloured, it's colourful, it's exciting. And we've got this alliteration of the M sound. Then we have a simile, sprouted like water, and this goes to show the men's strength and excitement as we see them jumping through the air to header the ball. It's quite interesting here because throughout the poem we've seen already that nature is personified, and here we almost see the reverse of that, where the men are given qualities of inanimate objects. So we see how the line is almost blurred between the two, how everything seems to be alive and equal. The ball blew away downwind, and then we have this dash here, and this just goes to show us, as we witness the wind carrying the ball away, and it carries us into the next stanza. I haven't noted the alliteration of the B sound again here, but it is something to note. We see it in stanza 1, stanza 2, and subsequently in stanza 3. So here we have this adjective to describe the men. The rubbery men bounced after it. When I was thinking about the connotations of the word, it suggests that the men are very flexible and very skillful in being able to run after the ball and are able to find it and retrieve it. Just as I said, we have this alliteration again, showing that bouncing rhythm, and it carries on through the first stanzas, the first 3 stanzas. The alliteration of it hung in the wind over a gulf of treetops. This gives a beautiful visual image of the ball almost being held above the trees. It's almost as if nature is playing with the football players. So, as I just said, it seems the wind is playing a game of its own with the players, keeping the ball just out of reach. So it does show that hint of power from nature. But as we see now, we start to see longer stanzas. And the stanza length is very important in this poem because it varies quite significantly. But what you'll see is the longer stanzas go to show the more forceful wind. So the stronger the wind, the longer the stanza. So then we move into our longer stanza, which is stanza 4, winds from fiery holes in heaven, and it ends with the rain lowering a steel press. So the longer stanza goes to show us the full extent of the storm. So here we see the immense power that is released across the sky. If you are writing for GCSE, you may want to consider how can we allude to religion here, considering the almost juxtaposition of heaven and fiery holes when considering hell, and maybe the player's position on it and how they feel about the storm. Do they see it as something threatening, or do they see it as something that heaven has gifted them? We now move from the plosive B to a much more husky H sound, and this change signifies how the wind has transformed from an almost playful friend to a dangerous opponent. And that is emphasized by the word piled. We get this image of this unrelentlessness and the pressure and force that the wind and the storm is applying to nature and to the players around them. But in the next line, what is very important is that it says it is to awe them. So the purpose of the wind was not to scare, but actually to inspire and to create a sense of awe for the players and for the people of the world. It really is to be a thing of beauty and to be appreciated. And I think that goes back to the theme of just how majestic and beautiful that nature really is. Then we see mixed its mad oils and through glooms. You get images of a painter, almost a crazed painter, smearing paint across the canvas. But we know that ultimately it's going to be an absolute beautiful work of art. And then we have quite a strong end stop line. Then the rain lowered a steel press. So we see the metaphor here and just the sheer force that the storm has and that it's shaping the landscape below it. Then the tone very much changes, and so does the stanza structure. We go back to a 3-sentence stanza, and we focus back now on the players themselves and their response to the storm. And it says they all just trod water. So we get this idea that they remain, they don't try to escape or run away from it. And this may be a wider message from Hughes to talk about when faced with the storm, that the players don't give up. And then how can we apply this to our own lives? And possibly when we face problems or dangers or challenges, how can we best face them to have a good outcome? To puddle glitter, this very much links to childhood when you think about jumping in puddles and creating things with glitter and splashing about. So we actually see that even though the storm was intense, it seems to have brought a lot of joy to the players, and they almost feel as if they've regressed to their younger selves, where they could go out running and jumping in the puddles. And their shouts bobbed up. So here we get this image and idea of the players keeping their heads above water. So they are not struggling, they are embracing the situation. They are fun and they are enjoying every minute of it. Coming fine and thin. So here, actually, if we consider the connotations of the word fine and thin, they may have very negative connotations. It almost sounds quite insignificant, or I'm fine. And then if we think about thin, it could connote fragile. However, we then have a caesura, and then we have subsequent adjectives that show that the players are washed and happy. So then here it kind of shows that the rain has cleaned the players and it's been quite a refreshing experience. So if we think about that on a slightly deeper level, it could potentially be that feeling insignificant has actually made the players feel quite happy and childlike once again. I think as we get older, we all have certain pressures and difficulties that we have to face. But when we can regress to those childlike moments or memories, we see just how grand and beautiful the world is, and those problems seem to melt away. So stanza 5, we continue with the 3-sentence stanza, and now the focus turns to the landscape, and the tone changes quite significantly. So here we see a description of the hills as if it's recoiling or sinking, it's humped over, and the valleys blued and unthinkable. And obviously blue could connote this idea of being covered in water from the storm, but it can also mean sad. And I think when we consider the next line, when it says under the depth of Atlantic depression, we do have to consider a more negative connotation of the word. So it could mean literally underwater, but it continues with the notion of feeling sad. So this could allude to psychological depression and the feelings and worries and stresses people have. So the extensive use of alliteration, assonance and consonants used throughout the stanza changes the mood and tone of the poem, making it much more melancholy. Can you find all the instances where it's used? If you can find some and comment them below, I will reply and let you know if you found them all. And then we move from stanza 6 to stanza 7. And again, we go even shorter, okay, a shorter stanza structure, just 2 lines. And this is where we go back to the excitement of the players. The tone shifts, and despite the miserable surroundings, the players continue to enjoy their game. But the wingers leapt, they bicycled in air, and the goalie flew horizontal. The semantic field here gives us a sense of weightlessness of the players, and that of course shows a stark contrast between the external world and the pressure and the steel press and the depression, and how it contrasts with their behaviour and feelings. Very, very uplifting. And of course we have enjambment here, and it reflects that movement of the players, them jumping around, and the goalie flinging himself across the goalpost to try to save the ball. So it just goes to emphasize how lively they are. And then the last stanza, once again, we end with 2 lines, and once again, a golden holocaust. So here we see a description of the sun, but we see a duality in the description, because of course golden creates a sense of beauty and wonder. However, the holocaust, of course, symbolizes death. So we aren't led to feel that there is going to be a resolute or entirely happy ending. It's almost a reminder that nature is unpredictable and it can change at any time. But it lifted the cloud's edge. So again, another piece of personification, this time of the sun, as it peels back the clouds to observe the men. And it's almost as if that awe is reciprocated from nature, and it looks at humans' adversity to challenges and how we embrace challenges and don't give up. So again, that's the deeper meaning of the poem, and perhaps what Hughes was trying to describe and outline to us all. So of course, as I said, it isn't entirely positive, so we do have to consider what could Hughes's message be. But as we know from his collection, he often explores themes of nature and how unpredictable it is, and how it is something to be feared, but also something to be to appreciate and understand just how wonderful and beautiful it is. So if we consider the form, meter and rhyme, so the form, it has 8 stanzas made up of 25 lines, and as I said before, the structure mimics the intensity of the storm, and that very, very long stanza, the 5-sentence stanza, shows us the crescendo and the moments thereafter. The poem doesn't use meter. As we've said before, meter usually allows a poet to express predictability, but in this poem we don't see that, and it's the lack of meter that possibly reflects the unpredictability of nature, but also of the game of football as well. We never know who's going to win or how it's going to go. And for rhyme, as we said, there isn't a rhyme scheme, but you should comment on the use of alliteration and other techniques throughout the poem. We need to embrace the unpredictable nature of the world and find beauty even in challenging times. So I'm finally going to share an essay question with you. This is an adaptation of an essay question from the CAIE website. One that seems to be coming up more often is to discuss, how does Hughes use words and images to powerful effect in this poem? So if you have some ideas on how you would potentially answer this and you'd like to share them in the comments below, I'll be sure to read them and get back to you. Thanks very much for watching, guys. I hope that you find this video helpful. Don't forget to like and subscribe as I work through the other 15 Ted Hughes poems for CAIE over the coming months. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you in the next one. Bye, guys.